A powerful executive's perfectly organized life changes when an unknown child calls him daddy and hands him a lunchbox. The unexpected gesture awakens painful memories, forgotten promises, and a past he had buried under years of routine. Driven by guilt, affection, and redemption, he embarks on a quiet journey that redefines what family and belonging truly mean. The alarm clock rang exactly at 5:30 a.m., as it did every day in Henry Vancroft's penthouse in the Kensington neighborhood of London. At 47, the president of Vancroft Investments had turned his routine into an exact science. 15 minutes of stretching, 30 minutes on the treadmill, a 5-minute shower, breakfast prepared by his private chef, and by 7:15, his driver was already waiting in the garage. "Good morning, Mr. Vancroft," greeted George, his driver for 8 years, opening the door of the imported black sedan. "Good morning, George. Let's take the embankment today. Traffic on Canary Wharf will be congested because of that tech event," Henry replied, without taking his eyes off his phone screen, where he was checking Asian market quotes. As the car glided through London traffic, Henry mentally reviewed his schedule. Meeting with international investors at 9:00, lunch with the president of a Swiss bank, video conference with the Edinburgh branch at 3:00 p.m., and finally, signing the contract for the acquisition of a financial technology startup at 5:30 p.m. Everything meticulously timed, as it should be. The imposing mirrored glass building that housed the headquarters of Vancroft Investments was one of the most modern on Canary Wharf, London's financial heart. Henry entered through the exclusive access, greeted the head of security with a discreet nod, and headed for the private elevator that would take him directly to the top floor. "Good morning, Dr. Vancroft," said Cecilia, his executive secretary for over a decade. "The reports you requested are on your desk. Coffee is ready, and the investors have confirmed their attendance for the 9 o'clock meeting." "Thank you, Cecilia. Please ask the legal department to expedite the sending of the acquisition documents. I want to review them before signing," Henry replied, as he walked across the wide corridor towards his office. His glass-walled office offered a panoramic view of London, a city that seemed small before the empire he had built. In the eyes of the financial market, Henry Vancroft represented absolute success, incalculable fortune, the respect of competitors, and an impeccable reputation for never having made a false move. What no one knew was that behind that facade of perfection, there was a man who hid his past under lock and key. The morning unfolded with its usual predictability. The meeting with foreign investors had been productive. Henry had a gift for transforming numbers into compelling narratives, for selling not just financial analyses, but visions of the future. It was almost noon when Cecilia entered his office, with an expression that did not match her usual professionalism. "Dr. Vancroft, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a situation in the lobby," she said hesitantly. "What kind of situation?" he asked, without raising his eyes from the documents he was analyzing. "A child. A girl. She's asking for you and refuses to speak to security." Henry finally looked up, intrigued. "A child? Alone?" "Yes, sir. And she's holding a lunchbox saying she came to deliver your lunch." Henry felt a strange unease. Children did not enter that building unless accompanied, and certainly no child would come to bring him lunch. Something was wrong, and his analytical mind immediately began to process possibilities. "Have security take her to the meeting room on the 2nd floor. I'll be down." The elevator never seemed so slow. When the doors opened on the 2nd floor, Henry spotted, through the glass walls of the meeting room, a small figure sitting in one of the large executive chairs, swinging her legs that barely touched the floor. A colorful lunchbox rested on the polished mahogany table. Henry entered the room with cautious steps, as if approaching an enigma he couldn't decipher. The girl, who couldn't have been more than 7, wore a simple pink dress, white sneakers, and had her brown hair tied in 2 braids. When she looked up, Henry felt as if time froze. Those eyes, he knew those eyes. "Hi, Uncle Henry," the girl said naturally, as if they met every day. "I brought your lunch. Mommy said you forget to eat when you're too busy." Henry remained motionless, unable to process the absurd situation. Who are you?" he finally managed to ask. "I'm Julia," the little girl replied with a smile that revealed a missing front tooth. "Julia Sterling. Uncle Edward's daughter. Don't you remember me? Edward Sterling. The name hit Henry like a punch to the stomach. Edward, his best friend from university. Edward, the firefighter who had saved his life during the fire in the city 3 years ago. Edward, who was no longer with them. Julia, Henry murmured, approaching slowly. How did you get here? Where's your mother? I came by bus, she said proudly. Mommy's teaching classes. She doesn't know I came, but I know how to walk alone. I'm 7 years old already. Henry sat before her, trying to organize his thoughts. Edward's daughter was here alone, after crossing one of the largest cities in Europe to deliver him a lunchbox. The absurdity of the situation contrasted with the seriousness in the girl's eyes. Julia, you shouldn't have come alone. London is too dangerous for a child to walk without an adult. But I had to find you, she replied, with a determination that didn't match her age. Mommy cries every night. She thinks I don't know, but I hear her. And she always looks at Daddy's picture with you. Julia opened the backpack she was carrying and took out a slightly crumpled photograph. In the image, 3 smiling men posed in front of a fire truck, Edward, Henry, and a third man whom Henry recognized as Charles, another firefighter from Edward's battalion. Daddy always said that if he could never be with us again, you would be, Julia continued with a simplicity that cut like a knife. But you never came to our house after the day Daddy went to heaven. Henry felt the crushing weight of guilt. Edward's last words echoed in his mind. Take care of them for me, brother, promise. And he had promised with tears in his eyes as he held his friend's hand on the hospital bed. A promise he broke the moment the crematorium doors closed. When he disappeared from the lives of Louisa and Julia Sterling, unable to face the living reminder of the friend he had lost and the debt he could never repay. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching us from. We continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear. You promised, Daddy, Julia said with that merciless clarity of children. He used to tell me stories about the two of you. He said you were like a brother. Henry swallowed hard. The gold watch on his wrist showed 12:15. Lunch with the president of the Swiss bank was scheduled for 12:30 at the restaurant 2 blocks away. It was a crucial commitment to close an investment of £500 million. But before him was the daughter of the man who had given his life to save him, holding a child's lunchbox with unicorn drawings. Julia, I need to call your mother. She must be worried, he said, trying to maintain control of the situation. Her class only ends at 3 o'clock, the girl replied. She teaches special children at a school in Islington. There's a little boy who doesn't speak, but he draws very well. Mommy says he draws with his soul. Henry picked up his phone and dialed Cecilia. Cancel my lunch with Mr. Muller. Tell him I had a family emergency. Reschedule for tomorrow if possible. He paused. And please bring something for the girl to eat. 10 minutes later, Cecilia entered with a healthy sandwich, orange juice, and a portion of fries. Julia looked at the food with interest, but then opened the lunchbox she had brought. I brought it for you, she said, pushing the lunchbox towards Henry. Mummy always makes peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for me. It's very tasty. Henry opened the lunchbox and found a sandwich wrapped in aluminum foil, an apple and a note written in childish letters. For Uncle Henry. With love, Julia. Something broke inside him. How many times had Edward shared an improvised sandwich with him during their university years, when they shared a tiny apartment near Imperial College, London? Peanut butter is the secret to happiness, Edward used to say, always optimistic even on the toughest days. You need to eat, Julia insisted. I promised Daddy I'd take care of you too. Henry bit into the sandwich, feeling a lump in his throat. It was a taste that transported him back to another time, when life was simpler and friendship meant everything. As they ate, Julia talked about her life, school, her friends, the cat named Fuba, Cornmeal, she had adopted the previous year. She talked about how she helped her mother correct students' homework and how she kept her father's picture under her pillow to dream of him. Mommy doesn't have that big smile anymore, Julia said, biting into a French fry. She smiles small now. Only when she thinks I'm not looking, she gets sad. Your mother is a very strong woman, Henry replied, feeling the guilt grow with each word the girl spoke. She's been a special education teacher for 5 years. Before that, she worked at that big bank in the city, the same one where you worked before you had your own company. Henry nodded. Louisa had been a financial analyst at the same bank where he began his career. It was there that he met Edward when the firefighter came to give a lecture on safety. Henry had introduced the two, without imagining that he was uniting souls that complemented each other perfectly. "And where are you living now?" he asked, trying to hide that he really knew nothing about their lives for the past 2 years and in the same place. Apartment 502 on Acacia Avenue in Islington. "But Mrs. Jenkins, the building manager, said we'll have to leave because we're behind on the rent." Julia spoke naturally, as if she didn't realize the gravity of those words. "Mommy says everything will be fine, that God provides. But I saw her counting coins last night." Henry felt a pang in his chest. Edward had bought that apartment with such pride, making a point of showing him every room, explaining plans for renovating the kitchen for the room that would be Julia's. How had Louisa lost the property? What had happened to the life insurance Edward surely had as a firefighter? Cecilia gently knocked on the door and entered. "Dr. Vancroft, the startup representatives are already in reception. They came early to discuss some details before the formal signing." Henry checked his watch. 1:40 p.m. Time had flown during the impromptu lunch with Julia. "Ask them to wait in the meeting room on the 3rd floor. I'll be up in 20 minutes. After Cecilia left, Henry looked at Julia, who was now drawing in a notepad she had taken from her backpack. "Julia, I can't let you go home alone. I'll send my driver to take you to your mother's school." "I don't want to go to school now," she replied, without looking up from her drawing. "I want to stay with you. Daddy said you knew very funny stories about when you lived together." Henry hesitated. Every commitment on his agenda represented millions in business, connections he had meticulously cultivated over years. But before him, a 7-year-old child challenged his perfectly organized world with the simple expectation of hearing stories about her father. "I have some important meetings now," he said finally, "but I promise I'll take you personally to your mother when I'm done. In the meantime, you can stay in my office. Cecilia will be with you." "Do you really promise? Because you promised Daddy too, but you didn't keep it," Julia replied with a sincerity that struck him like lightning. Henry swallowed hard. "I promise, Julia. This time I promise, and I will keep it." He took the girl to his presidential office, asking Cecilia to accompany her. He provided paper, colored pencils, and even turned on the huge television to a children's channel. Before leaving for the meeting, he saw Julia settled on the immense leather sofa, drawing with concentration. On the paper, the figure of 3 people holding hands began to emerge: a woman, a girl, and a man in a suit. The next 4 hours were torturous for Henry. While discussing contractual clauses and market strategies, his mind kept returning to the little visitor in his office. What would he say to Louisa? How would he explain having disappeared completely after Edward's funeral? How would he confess that he had broken the most important promise he had ever made in his life? When he finally managed to conclude the last meeting, it was past 6 in the evening. He rushed to his office and found Julia asleep on the sofa, with Cecilia silently putting away the drawings the girl had made. "She's adorable," Cecilia whispered. "She told me about her firefighter father and how he saved people. She seems proud." Henry nodded, looking at the sleeping girl. The serene expression on the child's face contrasted with the storm that was now forming within him. Guilt, remorse, shame, feelings he had buried under spreadsheets and financial reports for the past 2 years. "Cecilia, find out the exact address of the school where Louisa Sterling works. It's an institution for special children in Islington." While his secretary looked for the information, Henry sat beside Julia, observing her face, which so resembled Edward's. The same slightly upturned nose, the same freckles on her cheeks, the same determined expression even in sleep. "I found it. Doctor," Cecilia said, returning with a paper in her hands. "New Horizon Institute, specialized in inclusive education. Professor Louisa Sterling teaches there from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. and then coordinates an art therapy project until 6 p.m. The address is 1842 Patriots Way." Henry checked his watch. 6:20 p.m. Louisa would probably still be there. Perhaps worried about her daughter's whereabouts. Perhaps still unaware that Julia had run away to find him. "Is George already waiting with the car?" he asked Cecilia. "Yes, sir." "Excellent. Cancel all my commitments for tomorrow morning. I'm taking Julia home now." Carefully, Henry picked up the sleeping girl. She was light and instinctively rested her head on his shoulder without waking up. The childish scent of chamomile shampoo, mixed with the smell of colored pencils, made something tighten in Henry's chest. The black sedan slid silently through the congested streets of London. In the back seat, Henry held Julia, still asleep. As he watched the city lights through the window, his mind replayed the last 2 years. After the accident that claimed Edward's life, he had completely withdrawn from Louisa and Julia, not for lack of consideration, but because of the overwhelming weight of guilt. Edward had entered that burning building to save him. "Stay here, man. He'll be right back," were the last words he heard from his friend before he disappeared into the smoke. Henry should have been the victim, not Edward. How could he look into the eyes of the widow and daughter of the man who died in his place? "We've arrived, sir," George announced, stopping the car in front of a modest but well-maintained building on Patriots Way. The New Horizon Institute occupied a 2-story building with a light blue facade and colorful drawings on the windows. A small garden with adapted toys indicated their commitment to inclusion. Even at that hour, some lights were still on the 2nd floor. "Wait here, George. I'll take the girl in." Henry got out of the car with Julia in his arms. She was beginning to wake up, rubbing her eyes with her small hands. "Are we there, Uncle Henry?" she asked sleepily. "Yes, we're at your mother's school." An elderly security guard opened the gate after Henry identified himself. He explained that most of the teachers had already left, but that the coordinator Louisa was still in her office, organizing materials for the next day. "2nd floor, 3rd door on the right," the man indicated, looking curiously at the girl who was now awake, still in Henry's arms. "Hi, Mr. Anthony." Julia greeted cheerfully. "I brought Uncle Henry to meet Mommy." The 2nd floor corridor was silent. Only the distant sound of soft music came from one of the rooms. Henry felt his heart accelerate with each step. What would it be like to see Louisa again after so long? What would he say to her? The door to the 3rd room was ajar. Inside, a woman with her back turned was organizing children's paintings on a large panel. Her brown hair was tied in a simple bun, and she wore a long navy blue skirt and a white blouse. Even from behind, Henry recognized her immediately. "Mommy!" Julia cried, jumping out of Henry's arms and running into the room. Louisa Sterling turned instantly, her expression changing from surprise to relief, and then to a mixture of confusion and shock as she saw who was accompanying her daughter. "Julia, where have you been?" "I called the school, your friends. I was about to call the police," she exclaimed, hugging her daughter tightly. Her eyes, however, did not leave Henry's face. "I went to visit Uncle Henry," Julia replied, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "I took him lunch like you always do for me." Louisa finally stood up, still holding her daughter's hand. The years had been kind to her. She was still beautiful, with that natural elegance she had always possessed. But there was something different in her gaze, a hardness, a determination forged in adversity. "Henry," she said simply, neither a greeting nor an accusation, just the acknowledgement of his presence. "Hi, Louisa," he replied, feeling strangely inadequate in his expensive suit and Italian shoes. "Julia showed up at my office today. Said she took the bus there." "Julia Maria Sterling." Louisa knelt down, meeting her daughter's eyes. "How could you do that? Do you know the danger you were in walking alone through the city?" "I was dying of worry." "Sorry, Mommy," Julia murmured, looking down. "But I needed to find Uncle Henry. Daddy said he would take care of us, remember?" Louisa closed her eyes for a moment, as if seeking strength. When she reopened them, there was a calm determination in her gaze. "Julia, I need to talk to Uncle Henry. Can you go to Aunt Regina's room to get your backpack?" "It should be in the last room down the hall." The girl nodded and skipped down the corridor, leaving a dense silence between the two adults. "I'm so sorry," Henry began, but Louisa raised her hand, interrupting him. 2 years. Henry. 2 years without a call, without a message, without anything. You disappeared after the funeral, not even on important dates, her birthday, Christmas, Father's Day, which she spends crying, nothing. I didn't know what to say, he confessed, feeling as if every word was insufficient in the face of what he had done, or rather what he hadn't done. How could I look at you knowing that Edward died because of me? "Because of you?" Louisa repeated, incredulous. "Edward was a firefighter, Henry. He died doing what he loved, saving lives. It wasn't your fault. He went into that building to save me, Louisa. He went into that building to save anyone who was in there. It was his job, his calling. Louisa took a deep breath. But you know what's worse? It wasn't your feeling of guilt that hurt me. It was your absence when we needed you most. When Julia asked about her godfather who promised to be there, when the bank wanted to repossess our apartment because of the debt, when I had to sell the car to pay the hospital bills. The mention of financial difficulties hit Henry like a punch. He, one of the richest men in the country, had not even thought about the possible material needs of his friend's family. I didn't know. Of course you didn't know. How could you know if you disappeared? Louisa's voice showed no anger, only a deep disappointment. We managed to move forward, Henry. I had to restart my career from scratch, trade the financial market for special education, but I found my way. Julia is a strong, intelligent girl with a huge heart like her father's. We're fine. We don't need your pity now. It's not about pity, Louisa, Henry replied, taking a step towards her. Edward was like a brother to me, and I failed you. Failed the promise I made to him. But I want to fix this. Some things can't be fixed with money, Henry. I'm not talking about money, Henry paused. Although if you're having financial problems, I'd like to help. It's the least I can do. Louisa smiled sadly. Time passes, people change. The Henry that I knew, who shared a tiny apartment with Edward during university, would understand that it's not money we need. The comment hit home. When had he become this man who believed everything could be solved with money? When had the cold, calculating executive completely replaced the idealistic young man who dreamed of changing the world alongside his friend? And what do you need? He asked sincerely. Before Louisa could answer, Julia ran back, holding her colorful backpack. Aunt Regina sent you a big kiss, Mommy, and she said she's bringing that carrot cake I like tomorrow. Louisa smiled at her daughter, a genuine smile that lit up her face. Thank you, my love. Now we need to go home. It's getting late. Is Uncle Henry coming with us? Julia asked hopefully. Louisa and Henry exchanged glances. So many unspoken things hung between them. Actually, Henry began, I'd like to give you a ride. My driver is downstairs. And maybe we could talk more about all this. Louisa hesitated. The distrust and hurt of 2 years of abandonment wouldn't disappear with a simple ride. But looking at her daughter's expectant face, something softened in her expression. All right, but just the ride. As for the rest, we'll see. In the car, Julia talked non-stop about her day, about how she had secretly planned the visit to Uncle Henry, about the drawings she had made in his office. Louisa listened attentively, but Henry noticed that her eyes often wandered to the urban landscape, as if searching for answers in the city lights. When they arrived at the building on Acacia Avenue, Henry noticed that the building, once well-maintained, now showed signs of neglect, peeling paint, an unkempt garden, a broken intercom. Julia, go on up. The key is in the side pocket of my backpack, Louisa said. I'll just say goodbye to Uncle Henry. The girl hugged Henry tightly before getting out of the car. You'll come back, won't you? Promise? Henry looked at Louisa, seeking some sign of approval. We'll see, Julia. Now go. Obey your mother. When they were alone in the back seat of the car, silence again weighed heavily between them. I really am sorry, Louisa, Henry said finally. I know words aren't enough, but I want you to know that I never forgot about you. I just didn't know how to deal with the situation. Life doesn't come with an instruction manual, Henry. We're all improvising here, Louisa sighed. Edward trusted you. He spoke of your character, your loyalty. He said you were the best man he knew, even though your success had gone to your head a bit in recent years. The next morning brought a typical London winter fog. Henry woke up even before the alarm, after a restless night's sleep. Louisa's words and Julia's hopeful gaze haunted him in fragmented dreams. For the first time in years, he skipped his rigorously timed morning routine. There was no stretching, no treadmill, no financial reports, just a strong cup of coffee as he watched the city awaken from his penthouse in Kensington. Sir, the car is ready, Margaret, the housekeeper, informed him, surprised to see her employer still at home at that hour. Thank you, Margaret. Today I'll drive myself. The surprise on the woman's face reflected how unusual the situation was. Henry hadn't driven his own car in years, preferring to use his commuting time to deal with work matters. 40 minutes later, He parked his Porsche Cayenne in front of the New Horizon Institute. The school was already bustling with activity, with parents dropping off their children and teachers welcoming the little ones with warm smiles. Henry remained in the car for a few minutes, observing. There was a different atmosphere there, far from the cold, calculating corporate environment he was accustomed to. The children, some with visible disabilities, others seemingly typical, were greeted with hugs called by name, treated with individualized care that impressed him. Finally, he mustered the courage and got out of the car. He wore more casual clothes than usual, designer jeans, a light blue shirt, and a sports blazer. Even so, he stood out in the school environment, attracting curious glances. At reception, he identified himself to a young secretary. "I'd like to speak with Professor Louisa Sterling. Please?" "Professor Sterling is in class at the moment. Do you have an appointment?" "Actually, no." "I'm a family friend," he replied, feeling the strangeness of the situation. What was he to Louisa and Julia now? A friend? A stranger? The man who broke a sacred promise. "If you'd like to wait, she'll have a break at 10 a.m. That's only—" The secretary checked her watch. 20 minutes. Henry nodded and sat on one of the small benches in the hall. The wall in front of him was covered with children's drawings, each signed with shaky letters or just colorful marks. In the center, a large poster announced, "Annual Art Exhibition, New Horizon Special Artists," for the end of that month. A familiar voice interrupted his thoughts. "Uncle Henry," Julia exclaimed, running towards him. The girl wore the school uniform, a white t-shirt with the Institute's logo and a navy blue skirt. "You really came? I said I would, didn't I?" he replied, smiling genuinely for the first time in days. Julia Sterling, "Get back in line," called a young teacher, guiding a line of children down the corridor. Seeing Henry, she frowned. "Are you a relative of Julia's?" "He's my uncle," the girl replied before Henry could say anything. "He's my daddy's best friend who's in heaven." The teacher's expression softened. "I see. Nice to meet you. I'm Regina Oliver, art teacher. Julia talks a lot about her firefighter uncle, but never mentioned another uncle." "Henry Vancroft," he introduced himself, extending his hand. Was a friend of Edward, Julia's father." "Oh yes," Regina replied with a look of recognition. "You're the man in the photo, the one with the fire truck. Julia has that photo on her desk." Henry felt a wave of emotion, realizing that, despite his absence, he was somehow still a part of the little girl's life. "Can I show him the school, Aunt Regina?" "Please," Julia pleaded. "Not now, dear. We have math class. Maybe at recess." Regina smiled at Henry. "If you're still here, of course." "I will be," he assured her. While waiting, Henry examined the works displayed in the corridor. He was surprised by the quality of some paintings, made by children with different challenges. One in particular caught his attention, a starry sky over a city, with strokes vaguely reminiscent of Van Gogh, but with a pure originality, uncontaminated by formal techniques. "That's Theo's," a female voice said behind him. "Autistic, nonverbal, 12 years old, communicates only through art." Henry turned and found Louisa. She wore a simple dress patterned with small flowers and sneakers. Her hair was loose today, framing her face, which, even without makeup, radiated a serene beauty. She seemed more relaxed than the night before, more in her element. "It's extraordinary," Henry commented, referring to the painting. "Yes, he is. All of them are." Louisa paused. "What are you doing here, Henry?" There was no hostility in her voice, only genuine curiosity. "I wanted to see where you work, to get to know your life better now and maybe continue our conversation from yesterday." Louisa observed him for a moment, as if assessing his sincerity. "I have 10 minutes before the next class. Let's go to my office." She guided him down a lively corridor, with music coming from some rooms and children's laughter echoing from others. Louisa's office was small but cozy, with colorful books on the shelves, a small sofa in the corner, and a desk full of handmade educational materials. "You really found your place," Henry commented, looking around. "Yes," Louisa replied, sitting behind the desk. "It took me a while to realize, but this is what I always wanted to do. Edward knew. He always said I was in the wrong place, that my soul was that of an educator, not a financial analyst. He was always good at seeing the best in people." Henry agreed. A brief silence settled between them, laden with shared memories. "Why did you come, Henry?" "Really?" He took a deep breath before answering. "Julia made me remember the promise I made to Edward, and made me realize how much I failed you. I want to try to fix this if it's still possible." "As I said yesterday, some things can't be fixed," Louisa replied, but her tone was softer. "But perhaps we can move forward. For Julia, what happened to the apartment?" "Julia mentioned something about having to leave." Louisa sighed, running her hand through her hair in a gesture of weariness. "Edward had financed the property. When he left us, the insurance covered part of the debt, but not all of it. With my new salary, I couldn't keep up with the payments. The bank gave several warnings. I tried to negotiate, but..." She shrugged. "We have until the end of the month to vacate. And where will you go?" "I don't know yet. I'm looking for something cheaper nearby, so I don't have to take Julia out of school. Maybe a housing estate in Brixton. It's not ideal, but..." She looked at her watch. "I need to go back to class." "Louisa," Henry called as she was at the door, "would you mind if I sat in on one of your classes? I'd like to see you working with the children." She seemed surprised by the request. "I don't think it's a problem. You can come to my 11 a.m. class. It's an art therapy session with the advanced group." For the next hour, Henry walked through the school corridors, observing the activities through the half-open doors. In one room, children with Down syndrome learned to play simple musical instruments. In another, teenagers in wheelchairs participated in a group dynamic coordinated by a psychologist. The environment was one of genuine inclusion, not just theoretical. In the playground during recess, Julia found him again and insisted on introducing him to her friends. Peter, who had cerebral palsy, Marianne with autism, and Lucas with visual impairment. To the children, Henry was not the powerful executive of Vancroft Investments, but simply Julia's uncle, and this simplicity touched him deeply. At 11 a.m., Henry discreetly entered the room where Louisa was conducting an art therapy session. 8 children of different ages, or with some kind of special need, were sitting in a circle on the floor. In the center, various materials: paints, brushes, clay, fabric scraps, colorful buttons. "Today we're going to create something that represents how we feel inside," Louisa explained with a calm and welcoming voice. "There's no right or wrong in this activity. Each of you is unique, and your feelings are also unique." Henry watched, fascinated as Louisa moved among the children, giving individualized attention to each one, adapting her instructions to the specific needs of each student. With Theo, the autistic boy, she used very few words, more gestures and demonstrations. With Marianne, a girl with ADHD, she was more directive and structured. With Peter, who had motor difficulties, she offered physical support without ever doing it for him. An hour later, the room had transformed into an improvised gallery of emotional expressions, vibrant colors, abstract shapes, 3-dimensional constructions, each work as unique as its creator. "Now, who wants to share what they created?" Louisa asked. A boy of approximately 9 with Down syndrome raised his hand enthusiastically. "Me, Professor. Let's hear Gabriel then." "I made my heart," Gabriel said, showing a clay sculpture of an irregular shape, painted red and full of small holes. "It has holes because I miss my dad, but it's still big because I have a lot of love." Henry felt a lump in his throat. The child's raw sincerity caught him off guard. "It's a beautiful work, Gabriel," Louisa praised, gently touching the boy's shoulder. "We all have holes in our hearts, places where we miss someone, but that doesn't stop us from continuing to love." One by one, the students presented their creations. Marianne had made a mosaic with shredded paper, representing her thoughts that jump from one place to another. Peter created a drawing of a tree with deep roots, saying he wanted to be strong like it. Theo, who didn't speak, simply held up his painting, a swirl of blues and violets, and smiled, receiving enthusiastic applause from his classmates. When the class ended, Louisa escorted the students to the cafeteria and approached Henry, who remained leaning against the wall near the door. "So?" she asked. "What did you think?" "Incredible," he replied sincerely. "The way you connect with each of them, how you adapt to individual needs. It's a rare talent. It's not talent, it's practice. And a lot of study." Louisa began to organize the scattered materials. "I did 3 specializations after leaving the bank: neuropsychopedagogy, inclusive education and art therapy. How did you manage? Henry asked, helping her collect the brushes. I mean financially. These specializations aren't cheap. Scholarships, working 3 shifts, selling some belongings. She shrugged. You do what needs to be done. Henry nodded, feeling even more inadequate. While he accumulated millions, Louisa sold belongings to study and improve the lives of special children. I have a meeting with the parents now, she said, checking her watch. If you want to wait, we can have lunch together. There's a simple restaurant nearby where I usually go with Julia. I'd love to, Henry replied, surprised by the invitation. While waiting, Henry received a call from Cecilia. The startup acquisition needed his final signature, and the foreign investors wanted to confirm the follow-up meeting. For the first time in his career, Henry delegated both tasks. Ask Dr. Maxwell to finalize the acquisition, I trust his judgment, and reschedule the investors for next week. I'm dealing with urgent personal matters. After hanging up, he remained thoughtful. What was happening to him? In less than 48 hours, he had cancelled crucial meetings, delegated important decisions, and neglected his meticulously planned routine. All because of a forgotten promise and the hopeful eyes of a child. The restaurant Louisa had mentioned was an unpretentious Italian trattoria, with checkered tablecloths and walls decorated with black and white photos of old London. Nothing compared to the Michelin-starred establishments Henry frequented, but there was an authentic charm to the place. Mrs. Sterling, exclaimed the owner, a white-haired gentleman with a sauce-stained apron. And little Julia, where is she? She's at school, Mr. Giuseppe. Today we came at a different time, Louisa replied, introducing Henry as a family friend. They sat at a table in the back, overlooking a small garden. Giuseppe insisted on bringing the special of the day, eggplant lasagna, and a bottle of house red wine. So, you really liked what you saw? Louisa asked after the owner walked away. Very much. I never imagined a job like that. So meaningful. Henry paused, choosing his words. In my world, success is measured by numbers on spreadsheets, by successful acquisitions, by broken records. To see you working with those children, making a real difference in their lives, it's another dimension of success. Louisa observed him with curiosity. You've changed, Henry. Or perhaps you're just remembering who you were before. Before what? Before ambition consumed everything. Edward used to say you had 2 people inside you constantly fighting. The passionate idealist who wanted to change the world, and the cold strategist who wanted to conquer it. In recent years, the second seemed to be winning. Henry reflected on this as Mr. Giuseppe served the wine. Perhaps you're right. He raised his glass in a silent toast. Sometimes I wonder if it was worth it. All the money, the power, the recognition. And was it? So I'm starting to doubt it. Henry took a sip of wine, surprised by the quality of the simple drink. Did you know I have 3 houses I've never visited? I bought them as investments. One in Brighton, another in the Cotswolds, and an apartment in New York. I have a watch collection worth more than an apartment each, but I always wear the same one. And I've dined alone on my last 4 birthdays because I was closing important deals. Louisa didn't respond immediately, just listened. It was one of the qualities Henry had always admired in her, the ability to listen without judging. I'm not complaining about my life, he continued. That would be ungrateful. I achieved more than I ever dreamed. But when Julia showed up yesterday with that lunchbox talking about her father, our friend, I realized how much I've neglected what really matters. The lasagna arrived, steaming and aromatic. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes, each absorbed in their own thoughts. You know what impressed me most today? Henry asked finally. The way those children express themselves through art. So honest, so authentic, without social masks, without a hidden agenda. That's why I work with them, Louisa replied, smiling. They teach me more than I teach them. About authenticity, about accepting limitations while still dreaming big, about finding joy in small achievements. How did you manage to rebuild your life after... Henry hesitated, still uncomfortable talking directly about Edward's loss. After Edward passed away, Louisa completed naturally, one day at a time. For Julia mainly, she needed me strong, present. And also because Edward believed in my potential as an educator, always saying I was wasting my talent in the financial market. He was good at seeing the best in people, Henry agreed. Yes, he was. including in you. Louisa paused meaningfully. He greatly admired your business talent, Henry. But more than that, he admired your ability to dream big, to see possibilities where others saw obstacles. They talked for almost 2 hours, recalling stories of Edward, sharing memories of their university days, laughing at hilarious situations they had experienced together. It was as if a dam had broken after 2 years of avoiding any mention of their friend. Now the memories flowed freely, painful, but also comforting. "I have something for you," Louisa said when they finished coffee. From her purse, she took out a yellowed envelope. "Edward wrote this shortly before the accident. It was only to be given to you if he didn't come back. But after the funeral, you disappeared so quickly that I didn't have a chance to deliver it." Henry took the envelope with trembling hands. His name was written on the front, in Edward's strong, slanted handwriting. "Thank you," he murmured, putting the envelope in the inside pocket of his blazer. "I'll read it when I'm alone." As they left the restaurant, Henry insisted on paying the bill despite Louisa's protests. "I need to go back to school," she said, checking her watch. "I have a meeting with the coordination at 3 p.m. I can take you." On the short drive back, Henry gathered the courage to ask the question that had tormented him since he discovered the precarious situation Louisa and Julia were living in. "Louisa, I know it will seem intrusive, but I would like to help you with the apartment situation. Not as charity," he quickly added, seeing she was about to protest, "but as an investment in Julia's future. Edward would have done the same for my family if the roles were reversed. I appreciate the offer, Henry, but I can't accept. We need to make our way with our own resources." "Then at least let me help in another way. The Institute seems to need financial support for its projects. I can make a donation through my foundation. It would be a legitimate social investment, not a personal favor." Louisa seemed to consider the idea. "The Institute is indeed going through difficulties. We're about to lose our art therapy space because the rent for the annex room increased, and the annual exhibition project is compromised due to lack of materials. Then it's decided. I will instruct my team to prepare a partnership proposal with the Institute, totally transparent, without any special conditions for you or Julia." When they arrived at the school, Julia ran to them in the playground, excited to see that Henry was still there. "Uncle Henry, are you going to stay to see me in music class? I'm playing the flute today." "Another day, princess," he replied, bending down to her height. "Now I need to sort out some important things, but I promise I'll be back soon." "Pinky promise?" she asked, raising her pinky finger. "Pinky promise," he agreed, intertwining his pinky with hers in a solemn pact. On his way back to his office, Henry didn't turn on the radio or make work calls as was his custom. He drove in silence, absorbing everything he had experienced in the last 24 hours. Stopping at a traffic light on Oxford Street, he took the envelope from his pocket and looked at it. What had Edward written? What kind of message does a man leave for the friend he considers a brother, knowing it will only be read if he is no longer present? 3 weeks passed since the day Julia invaded Henry Vancroft's meticulously organized world with a simple pink lunchbox. 3 weeks of silent but profound transformations. On that sunny Saturday afternoon, Hyde Park was filled with families enjoying the weekend. Near the lake, Henry pushed Julia on a swing, while Louisa watched them from a nearby bench, a calm smile on her face. "Higher, Uncle Henry. I want to fly like a bird," Julia shouted, laughing. "If you fly, who will tell me stories?" he joked, slightly increasing the push. In recent weeks, Henry had become a constant presence in Louisa and Julia's lives, not just on weekends, but also at impromptu dinners during the week, on visits to the Institute in small everyday moments that slowly filled the void of 2 years of absence. Edward's letter had changed everything. Henry remembered every word, etched in his memory as if they had been written with fire. "Brother, if you're reading this, it's because I'm no longer here. No drama, you know me, always practical. I've been thinking a lot about life lately, about the risks of my job, about what really matters. Louisa says I'm getting too philosophical, but I think it's just fatherhood making me think about the future. If the worst happens, I don't want you to blame yourself. Whatever the circumstances, it was my choice. My job, my calling. I always knew the risks and accepted them freely. I only ask you one thing, look after Louisa and Julia, not as a provider or savior, They are strong and capable, but his family has a presence. Julia needs positive male role models in her life, and you, my friend, need their love as much as they need yours. That's the truth you may not have realized yet. I know you're busy building your empire, but don't let professional success blind you to what truly matters. Remember our pact in college. Neither of us will be poor in spirit or rich in regrets. I'm afraid you're losing balance, focusing too much on numbers and forgetting about people. I'm not asking for anything extraordinary. Just be present. A Sunday lunch, a trip to the park, a heartfelt conversation. It doesn't have to be perfect, you just need to be there. And please take care of yourself too. You were always the brightest of us, but also the hardest on yourself. Allow yourself to be human, to make mistakes, to ask for help when you need it. See you someday, brother. Wherever I am, I'll be rooting for you. With affection and admiration, Edward. Reading that letter alone in his apartment had provoked the first genuine crying fit Henry had had in decades. He cried for the loss of his friend, for the broken promise, for the lost time. But he also cried with gratitude, for the chance to start over, for the wisdom in Edward's simple words, for the opportunity to finally honor his commitment. The next day, he had taken discreet but decisive steps. Through the Vancroft Foundation, he acquired the building where Louisa and Julia lived, silently cancelling the eviction notice and renewing the lease indefinitely for a symbolic amount. He funded an extensive renovation of the New Horizon Institute, doubling the space available for art therapy activities and creating a fully equipped music room. Everything done with absolute discretion. Louisa only discovered who the anonymous benefactor was when the Institute's director, emotional, let it slip during a meeting. The ensuing discussion was intense. Louisa felt betrayed, manipulated. She accused Henry of trying to buy forgiveness, of treating with money what should be resolved with sincerity and presence. It took 3 days for her to answer his calls again. The reconciliation came after a long conversation, when Henry finally showed Edward's letter and explained that he wasn't trying to replace his friend, or save Louisa and Julia, just to honor a promise and repay the sacrifice of someone who had given his life for him. "Uncle Henry, look," Julia called, bringing him back to the present. "I managed to make a star in the sand. Come see." Henry followed the girl to the small sand area near the playground, where she had drawn an imperfect but charming star with a stick. "Beautiful, Ju. You have artistic talent like your mother, and courage like my father," she added proudly. "Mommy always says that." Louisa approached them carrying a picnic basket. "Who's hungry? I made those peanut butter sandwiches you two like so much." They sat under a leafy tree, spreading a checkered blanket over the grass. As they ate and chatted about trivialities, Henry watched Louisa and Julia's faces, lit by the golden light of late afternoon. There was a peace in that moment that no professional achievement had ever given him. "What are you thinking about?" Louisa asked, noticing his contemplative gaze. "How life comes full circle. A month ago I was completely absorbed in numbers, acquisitions, market strategies. Today I'm here sharing peanut butter sandwiches on a picnic in the park. And are you regretting it?" On the contrary. I feel more alive than I have in years." Julia, who was playing distractedly with a puppy passing by, ran back to them. "Mommy, can I have ice cream? There's a cart over there." "After your sandwich, dear. I'll take her," Henry offered. "You can rest a bit." As they walked to the ice cream cart, Julia held Henry's hand with the natural confidence of children. For her, there were no complexities, resentments, or unresolved guilt, just genuine affection for the uncle who had finally kept his promise to be present. "What flavor do you want, Princess?" he asked when they reached the colorful cart. "Strawberry." "It's my favorite." "What about yours?" "I think I'll go for chocolate." A classic. "Daddy liked pistachio," Julia commented casually. "Mommy said it was a strange taste, but he said it was sophisticated." Henry smiled. "Your father always wanted to seem more sophisticated than he really was. Did you know he only learned to eat sushi after he was 30? And even then he always ordered the simplest thing on the menu." Julia laughed. "Tell me more about Daddy when we get back to the picnic. Your mother has many good stories too." With ice creams in hand, they started walking back. Suddenly, Julia stopped and looked seriously at Henry. "Uncle Henry, can I ask you something important?" "Of course, Ju. What is it?" "Sir, do you like my mom?" "Really like her?" The question caught Henry completely off guard. He felt his face flush, grateful that Louisa was too far away to hear. "Why do you ask that, little one?" "Because you look at her the same way the prince looks at the princess in movies, and she also smiles differently when you're around." Her big smile came back. Children, so observant in their innocence. Henry hesitated, searching for the right words. How to explain to a 7-year-old the complexity of what he was feeling? The genuine affection for Louisa that had always existed, but which was now growing and transforming into something deeper. The respect for Edward's memory, the fear of overstepping boundaries, the confusion about his own feelings. "Your mother is a very special person, Ju, and yes, I like her very much. Then why don't you tell her? Sometimes things are complicated between adults." "Adults complicate everything," Julia sighed with a wisdom beyond her years. "When you like someone, you just say it." When they returned to the picnic spot, they found Louisa tidying the basket, putting away the remnants of the meal. "It's getting late," she explained. "Julia has ballet class early tomorrow. I can take you," Henry offered. On the way to the car, Julia ran ahead, chasing butterflies, while Louisa and Henry walked side by side in comfortable silence. "Thank you for today," Louisa said finally. "Julia loves spending time with you. I love being with her too. With both of you, actually." Louisa smiled. But there was something in her eyes, a mixture of gratitude and caution, as if protecting herself from excessive hopes. "Henry, we need to talk about about what's happening. This closeness, these weekends together, the dinners, the outings. I don't want Julia to get too attached and then suffer if you decide you've fulfilled your promise to Edward and move on." Henry stopped walking, turning to face her. "Is that what you think? That I'm just fulfilling an obligation? I don't know what to think. Everything happened so fast. A month ago, you were just a painful memory, the friend who disappeared when we needed him most. Now you're here, present, attentive, transforming our lives." "Louisa," Henry took a deep breath, gathering courage. Julia's words echoed in his mind. "When you like someone, you just say it. I'm not here out of obligation. I'm here because I want to be. Because you two brought back something I had lost, not just Edward's memory, but the ability to feel, to care about something beyond the next deal, the next professional conquest." He paused, searching for the right words. "I've always admired you, Louisa. Your character, your strength, your ability to rebuild your life even after the greatest loss. And in recent weeks, that admiration has grown every day. I'm not trying to replace Edward or erase the past, but perhaps we can build something new, something of our own." Louisa lowered her eyes, emotional. "I'm scared, Henry. Scared to trust and be disappointed again. Scared to make space for you in our lives and then be alone again. Not for myself, but for Julia." "I understand." Henry took her hands in his. "And I'm not asking you to trust me immediately. I'm just asking for a chance to show you day after day that I'm here to stay. Not as an obligation, but as a choice. My choice." Louisa looked up, meeting his eyes. There were tears there, but also a glimmer of hope she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. "One day at a time?" she asked with a half-smile. "One day at a time," he agreed. A few meters away, Julia watched the two with a mischievous smile, as if she had orchestrated that moment from the beginning. Perhaps she had. Children's intuition sometimes surpasses all adult wisdom. The following Sunday, the eagerly awaited annual art exhibition of the New Horizon Institute took place. Thanks to the investment from the Vancroft Foundation, the event, which traditionally happened only for family and friends at the school itself, now occupied a prestigious gallery in Mayfair and had been publicized in important media outlets. Louisa, as coordinator of the art therapy project, was nervous and radiant at the same time. She wore a simple but elegant blue dress, a gift from Henry for the occasion. Julia didn't leave her side, wearing a skirt and blouse set that matched her mother's. "What if no one likes the artworks?" Louisa asked, adjusting a painting's identification label for the 10th time. "They'll love them," Henry reassured her. "They are authentic works, full of genuine emotion. That's what matters in art." The gallery began to fill with visitors, proud parents, emotional teachers, media representatives, and important figures from the London cultural scene, personally invited by Henry. Each work was equally highlighted. Regardless of its creator's condition, That had been Louisa's only requirement for accepting the sponsorship. In the center of the exhibition, the collective work that brought together contributions from all students, a large panel titled Our Place in the World, representing diversity, inclusion, and beauty in differences. Theo, the non-verbal autistic boy, had created the starry sky that served as a backdrop. Gabriel, the boy with Down syndrome, had contributed colorful hearts scattered throughout the composition. Each student had left their mark, their unique voice. Mr. Vancroft called a reporter, approaching with a microphone. What motivated one of the country's biggest investors to sponsor an art exhibition by children with special needs? Henry smiled, looking at Louisa and Julia, who were talking to guests a few meters away. It's not just about social investment or philanthropy. It's about recognizing the intrinsic value of every human being, regardless of their apparent limitations. These children don't need our pity. They deserve our admiration. What you see on these walls are not works of charity. They are legitimate expressions of talent, emotion, and unique perspective. The reporter seemed genuinely impressed. And what is your personal connection to the New Horizon Institute? At that moment, Julia ran to Henry, clinging to his leg with the familiarity of someone who feels completely safe. Uncle Henry, come see. Theo's painting already has a red-soled ribbon. Just a moment, sir, Henry said to the reporter, bending down to Julia's height. Really, who bought it? A man in a suit said it's going to a super-fancy hotel lobby. Isn't that amazing? Absolutely incredible. Henry smiled, stroking the girl's hair. Turning back to the reporter, who was observing the interaction with interest, he added, "This is Julia Sterling, daughter of the Art Therapy Project Coordinator. And my answer to your question about my connection to the Institute is right here, in the people, in the lives that are transformed through inclusive education and art as therapeutic expression." As the reporter took notes, Louisa approached, visibly moved. "Regina just told me we've already sold 12 works. The money goes directly to the scholarship fund for low-income children. See? I told you it would be a success," Henry replied, putting an arm around her shoulders in a natural gesture of affection. The reporter, realizing there was more to that story than a simple corporate sponsorship, smiled discreetly and moved away, giving them privacy. The exhibition extended into the early evening, an undeniable success. When the last guests left, Louisa, Julia, and Henry remained in the almost empty gallery, savoring the moment. "Thank you," Louisa said, holding Henry's hand. "Not just for the exhibition, but for everything. For coming back into our lives. I should thank you. For giving me a second chance." Julia, who was playing distractedly with the colorful ribbons of the flower arrangements, turned to them with a suddenly serious expression. "I have an idea," she announced with the conviction of someone who had just solved a complex problem. "Uncle Henry could live with us. Then he wouldn't have to drive so much to visit us." Louisa and Henry exchanged surprised glances, then smiled, embarrassed, but not completely shocked by the suggestion. After all, the idea had crossed both their minds, though never verbalized. "Julia, what a thing to say," Louisa began, but Henry gently interrupted her. "Actually," he said, bending down to the girl's level, "I think your idea is very interesting. But this kind of decision needs to be made slowly, with great care and respect." "Why? If you two like each other, and I like both of you, what's the problem?" The impeccable logic of children. Henry and Louisa laughed, easing the tension of the moment. "How about we do this?" Henry proposed, looking at Louisa for approval. "For now, we'll continue as we are. I visit you, we go out together, we get to know each other better every day. And when the time is right, we'll talk about other possibilities, like you being my dad too," Julia asked with the devastating sincerity of childhood. The silence that followed was charged with emotion. Louisa had tears in her eyes. Henry felt a lump in his throat. "Julia," he said finally, "your father was an extraordinary man, a hero. No one could ever replace him, nor should they try." "I know," the girl replied, surprising them with her maturity. "Daddy will always be in my heart. But Professor Regina says our hearts are elastic. There's always room for more love. Can't I have two daddies?" Henry looked at Louisa, seeking help. She approached, kneeling beside her daughter. "The heart is indeed elastic, my love," she said softly. "And Uncle Henry has a very special place in ours. But some things need time. The important thing is that we're together now, right? A family doesn't have to follow a specific model to be true. So we are a family? Julia insisted, her eyes shining with hope. Yes, Henry replied before he could stop himself. In a different, unique way, like those artworks there. It doesn't need a name or definition to be true and special. Satisfied with the answer, Julia hugged them both at the same time. In that collective embrace, something silently sealed, a pact of belonging, a renewed promise, a beginning. Later, as they drove home in Henry's car, Julia fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted after the long day of emotions. In the comfortable silence that settled, Louisa held Henry's hand over the gear shift. "She's right, you know," she said softly, "about the heart being elastic." "I know," he replied, gently squeezing her hand. "Mine certainly is, and it's fuller now than it ever has been." Upon arriving at the building on Acacia Avenue, Henry carried the sleeping Julia up to the apartment. He carefully placed her in bed, while Louisa changed her into comfortable pajamas. The domestic scene, so simple and yet so profound, filled Henry's heart with a quiet certainty. In the living room, before saying goodbye, Henry hugged Louisa for a long time. "What we're building here," he murmured against her hair, "is something Edward would approve of. I'm sure of it." "Me too," she replied, raising her face to meet his eyes. "He always wanted us to be happy above all." When their lips met for the first time, it was as if a long wait had come to an end. A soft, respectful kiss, yet laden with promises. "Until tomorrow?" Henry asked as he pulled away. "Until tomorrow," Louisa confirmed, with a smile that lit up not only her face, but the entire apartment, the entire London night, the entire life opening up before them. In the next room, Julia smiled in her sleep, as if she knew her little plan was working out. After all, it had been she who, with a pink lunchbox and the courageous innocence of childhood, had initiated that journey of reconciliation and new beginnings. Under her pillow, the photo of the three men in front of the fire truck seemed to smile too, especially the one in the middle, whose generous spirit lived on in every gesture of affection, in every renewed promise, in every step taken towards a future built on foundations of love and forgiveness. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Henry, Louisa, and Julia has touched your hearts and shown that, even in the most difficult moments, it is always possible to start anew. If you were moved by this narrative of promises, forgiveness, and second chances, be sure to subscribe to our channel to receive more stories that explore the depth of human emotions. Give us a like, share with someone who needs to hear a message of hope, and tell us in the comments if you have ever experienced a fresh start in your life. Every Sunday we bring a new story to warm your heart and brighten your week. Until next time.